A daycare worker noticed an 8-year-old girl always arriving with bruises on her arms. When she installed a hidden camera in the classroom, the conversation she recorded between the girl's parents made her call 911 immediately. The morning fog hung low over Maple Glen, Vermont, clinging to the crimson and gold leaves that carpeted the quiet streets. Michelle Robinson's 10-year-old Subaru crunched across the gravel parking lot of Sunshine Learning Center at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the first arrivals would begin. As she always did, she parked in the same spot she'd claimed for the past 7 years, beneath the ancient oak tree that stood sentinel over the converted Victorian house that served as the town's most respected daycare facility. The October air bit at her cheeks as she unlocked the heavy oak door, the familiar scent of apple cinnamon, her signature morning welcome, wafting from the slow cooker she'd started the night before. At 35, Michelle had cultivated the kind of intuition that comes from working with children for over a decade. She could tell from the way they held their crayons whether they'd had a good breakfast, from their afternoon energy levels what kind of night they'd had, and from their eyes whether they carried secrets too heavy for their small shoulders. The morning routine unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. Tablecloths spread across child-sized tables, educational toys arranged in inviting clusters, morning snack of graham crackers and apple slices carefully portioned onto colorful plates. By 7:15, she was ready for the day's first arrivals. The bell above the door chimed at 7:20, and in rushed Tommy Parker, all energy and noise as usual, followed closely by his perpetually harried single mother. "Morning, Ms. Robinson," Tommy shouted, already halfway to the building blocks. "Inside voice, Tommy," Michelle reminded gently, accepting the boy's jacket and backpack from his mother. "Running late again, Ms. Parker apologized, checking her watch. "Emergency meeting at the hospital." "You're a lifesaver, Michelle." "No worries, that's what we're here for." The routine continued with familiar faces. The Wilson twins with their matching braids and mismatched socks, Jenny Martinez with her ever-present Pokemon backpack, little Aiden whose parents were going through a divorce that everyone tried to pretend wasn't happening. But at 7:45, the atmosphere shifted when Madison Matthews arrived. Michelle had worked with Madison for only 2 months since the family relocated from Boston for DR. Matthews' new position as head of pediatrics at Maple Glen Regional Hospital. On paper, the Matthews family represented the American dream, successful parents, beautiful home in the coveted Maple Heights subdivision, a charming child enrolled in dance classes and piano lessons. But something about Madison made Michelle's instincts prickle from their very first meeting. Victoria Matthews breezed in first, a vision of professional perfection in her tailored navy suit and designer heels that seemed almost comically out of place on the daycare's worn hardwood floors. Madison trailed behind, her small hand gripped tightly by her mother. Dr. Nathan Matthews followed, already distracted by his phone, his white coat peeking out from beneath his overcoat. "Good morning, Madison," Michelle greeted warmly, kneeling to the child's eye level as she always did. Madison mumbled something inaudible, her hazel eyes fixed on the floor. But as she removed her jacket, Michelle's breath caught in her throat. 3 distinct bruises marked the child's left arm, one at the wrist, one at the elbow, and another, older and yellowing, high on her bicep. The newest bruise was a deep purple, fingerprint-shaped marks clearly visible against Madison's pale skin. "Madison, sweetie, what happened to your arm?" Michelle asked, keeping her voice light and conversational despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. Before the child could answer, Victoria interjected smoothly, "Oh, you know how clumsy she is, forever running into things at home. Yesterday it was the coffee table, wasn't it, sweetheart?" Madison nodded mutely, but Michelle noted how the child's eyes darted nervously to her father, who had finally looked up from his phone. Something passed between father and daughter, a look Michelle couldn't quite decipher, but one that made her skin crawl. "Kids," Nathan said with a practiced laugh that didn't reach his eyes, "always finding new ways to give us gray hair." The exchange lasted mere seconds, but Michelle's internal alarm bells were ringing. She'd seen bruises before. They were an occupational hazard with active children. But these were different, too precise, too deliberate. The placement suggested restraint rather than accidents. As the Matthews departed with the usual rush of "have a good day" and "be good for Miss Robinson," Michelle watched Madison settle into her usual corner, far from the other children. Unlike Tommy's exuberant entrance or Jenny's immediate dive into activities, Madison moved with a careful deliberation that seemed unnatural for an 8-year-old. Throughout the morning, Michelle found herself paying extra attention to Madison's movements. The child favored her left arm, wincing slightly when she had to use it during art time. She sat alone during snack, picking at her apple slices but not eating. When Michelle casually asked if she'd had breakfast, Madison whispered, "Mommy says I eat too much." During free play, Tommy accidentally bumped into Madison, sending her sprawling. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Madison curled into a ball, covering her head with her arms, trembling violently. "Sorry," Tommy called out, already racing to the next activity, oblivious to Madison's distress. But Michelle noticed. She noticed how Madison's hands trembled as she methodically rebuilt the tower Tommy had knocked over, piece by piece, as if the simple act of stacking blocks required all her concentration to keep something else at bay. She noticed the child's sharp intake of breath whenever a door slammed, the way she flinched at raised voices, how she positioned herself with her back to walls, always watching, always alert. At noon, when Michelle's colleague Rachel arrived for the afternoon shift, she pulled her aside in the small office that doubled as their break room. The office was cramped, filled with filing cabinets and shelves of educational resources, but it offered privacy from the children's curious ears. "Have you noticed anything off about Madison Matthews?" Michelle asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Rachel, a 20-something early childhood education graduate fresh out of college, tilted her head thoughtfully. "She's quiet. Very different from our usual crew." "Why?" Michelle hesitated. In her field, jumping to conclusions could destroy families, but ignoring warning signs could destroy children. "She came in with bruises today. Several of them." "Kids get bruises all the time," Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction. "These were different." Michelle pulled out her incident notebook, a practice she'd maintained since her first day on the job. "I've been documenting. This is the 3rd time in 2 weeks she's had bruising on her arms." Always explained away as clumsiness. Rachel's eyes widened. "You think?" "I don't know what to think yet, but something's not right." Michelle glanced through the office window to where Madison sat alone, methodically coloring within the lines of a princess coloring book, never straying, never experimenting with colors the way other children did. "I'm going to keep watching." The afternoon dragged with an unusual tension. During story time, Madison sat in the back, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. When Michelle read the part where the brave princess confronted the dragon, most children cheered. Madison simply stared, her expression unreadable. At 4:30, parents began arriving for pickup. Tommy's mother, still in scrubs, swept in apologizing for being late. The Wilson twins' grandmother arrived with homemade cookies for the staff. And then, at 4:50, Victoria Matthews returned. "Mommy's here, Madison," Michelle called out. The change in Madison was immediate and chilling. The child's entire body tensed, her coloring forgotten as she slowly gathered her belongings. When Victoria reached out to help with her jacket, Madison subtly shifted away from her mother's touch. "How was she today?" Victoria asked, checking her phone. "Fine," Michelle replied, watching the interaction carefully. "Although I noticed she seemed to favor her left arm. Those bruises must be painful." Victoria's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. Annoyance? Fear? Children bounce back quickly. "Don't they, Madison?" "Yes, Mommy," came the whispered response. As they left, Michelle caught Madison's reflection in the window. For just a moment, the child's careful mask slipped, revealing something that made Michelle's heart ache, pure, unadulterated fear. That night, Michelle sat at her kitchen table long after dinner, her untouched tea growing cold as she reviewed her notes. 3 instances of bruising in 2 weeks. A child who flinched at sudden movements. Parents who seemed too polished, too perfect. Her mind wandered to her own childhood, to the years she'd spent covering bruises with long sleeves, making excuses for her father's temper, protecting her mother's reputation. She'd been 12 when a teacher finally noticed, finally asked the right questions. Ms. Hammond had saved her life, given her the courage to speak up. It had led to foster care, yes, but also to safety, to healing, to the career she chose so she could be someone else's Ms. Hammond. At 11 p.m., Michelle made a decision. She pulled out her laptop and began drafting an email to Janet Porter, the daycare's owner. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding Madison Matthews. Request for meeting." As she typed, the autumn wind rattled her windows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog howled at the moon. In her mind's eye, she saw Madison's frightened reflection again and silently promised the child what Ms. Hammond had promised her all those years ago. "I see you. I'll help you. You're not alone." She didn't know then that her decision to act would uncover a web of deception far more complex than simple child abuse. She couldn't have imagined that within weeks, she would be testifying in court, that lives would be shattered and rebuilt, that the truth would prove more horrifying than her worst suspicions. But she did know one thing with absolute certainty: she could not, would not, ignore the silent cry for help in Madison Matthews' eyes. Tomorrow, she would begin watching more carefully, documenting more thoroughly, and looking for the truth behind the bruises that marked not just Madison's skin, but Michelle suspected, her very soul. The email sent with a soft whoosh at 11:47 p.m. Michelle closed her laptop, finished her cold tea in one gulp, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. In her dreams, she saw bruises blooming like dark flowers on pale skin, heard whispered pleas for help, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders like a familiar, heavy blanket. When her alarm rang at 6 a.m., Michelle was already awake, staring at the ceiling and planning her next move. She didn't know it yet, but this ordinary Tuesday would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would test her courage, challenge her assumptions, and ultimately lead to a truth more shocking than anything she could have imagined. The darkness of early morning still clung to Maple Glen as Michelle parked her Subaru in the empty lot of Sunshine Learning Center. It was 6 a.m. on Wednesday, an hour earlier than usual. Her breath formed clouds in the cold air as she walked to the converted Victorian house, her boots crunching on frost-covered gravel. The building looked different in the pre-dawn gloom, more imposing, almost watching her with its darkened windows. Michelle's hands shook slightly as she unlocked the door, not from cold but from nervous anticipation. She'd spent a sleepless night wrestling with her decision to involve Janet. Years of experience had taught her that crossing certain lines, even with the best intentions, could have devastating consequences. But those same years had also taught her to trust her instincts, and every fiber of her being screamed that Madison Matthews needed help. Janet's office occupied what had once been the house's formal dining room. The original crown molding remained, painted white against sage-green walls. Janet had decorated it with a careful balance of professional and personal touches. Framed certificates, Best Workplace for Working Parents, 3 years running, Vermont Child Care Excellence Award, various first aid and child psychology certifications, lined one wall. The opposite wall displayed photographs spanning 40 years of the center's operation, each one carefully labeled with dates and names. Smiling children, proud parents, seasonal celebrations, a visual history of lives touched and changed. Michelle set up the coffee maker in the small kitchenette adjoining the office, selecting Janet's favorite Colombian blend. The familiar ritual of measuring grounds and filling the water reservoir steadied her nerves. As the machine began to gurgle and hiss, filling the air with rich aroma, she heard the front door open. Janet Porter entered with the quiet dignity that had become her trademark. At 63, she moved with the careful precision of someone who understood both the fragility and resilience of the human body. Her silver hair, usually styled in an elegant French twist, looked slightly disheveled, evidence of her early morning rush. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she, too, had spent a restless night after receiving Michelle's urgent email. "You've made coffee," Janet observed, hanging her wool coat on the antique rack. This must be serious. Michelle poured 2 mugs, adding a splash of cream to Janet's just as she liked it. Thank you for meeting me so early. I know this is unusual, but some things can't wait, Janet finished, accepting the mug. She settled into her leather office chair, the one her staff had given her for her 30th anniversary at the center. Tell me everything, Michelle. From the beginning. Michelle sat across from her, pulling out her carefully maintained notebook. The pages were filled with dated entries, each one meticulously detailed. Madison Matthews started here 2 months ago when her family relocated from Boston, DR. Nathan Matthews took the position of head of pediatrics at Maple Glen Regional. His wife, Victoria, is a real estate agent with Century Homes. I remember their enrollment interview, Janet nodded. Impressive family, Dr. Matthews seemed particularly interested in our safety protocols. At the time, I thought that was just normal parental concern, Michelle said. Now I wonder if there was more to it. She opened her notebook to the first flagged page. 3 weeks ago, I noticed the first bruise. Upper left arm about the size of an adult thumb. Victoria explained it away as clumsiness. Said Madison had run into a doorframe at home. Janet sipped her coffee, her expression neutral but attentive. 2 weeks ago, more bruises. This time on both arms, at the wrists. The explanation was that Madison had fallen during dance class. Michelle flipped to another page. Then yesterday, I saw fresh bruising on her left arm, 3 distinct marks. Fingerprints, Janet. Someone grabbed her hard enough to leave fingerprints. The older woman set down her mug, her face grave. And her behavior? That's what really concerns me. Michelle's voice dropped lower, as if the walls might be listening. She's not like the other children. She doesn't play, doesn't interact. She flinches at sudden movements, positions herself near exits during free time. And Janet, she's terrified during pickup, especially when it's her father coming to get her. Janet was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the desk, a nervous habit that only emerged during serious situations. You've always had excellent instincts. I remember your work with the Sullivan case. The memory hit Michelle like a physical blow. 4-year-old Tommy Sullivan with cigarette burns hidden beneath long sleeves in July. The investigation that followed had been grueling: testimonies, court appearances, the heart-wrenching moment when Tommy was removed from his home. But it had been necessary. It had saved his life. This feels different, Michelle admitted. More calculated somehow. Like there's something beneath the surface I'm not seeing. Janet pulled open her desk drawer and withdrew a thick file. Michelle recognized it as the Matthews enrollment paperwork. Let's review what we know about the family. Dr. Nathan Matthews, age 42, graduated top of his class from Harvard Medical School. Previous position: Chief of Pediatrics at Boston Children's Hospital. No criminal record. No complaints filed against his medical license. She turned a page. Victoria Matthews, age 38, formerly Victoria Pembroke of the Boston Pembrokes, old money, very old. Graduated from Wellesley with a degree in art history. Worked briefly at Sotheby's before marrying Dr. Matthews, now a licensed real estate agent specializing in luxury properties. The perfect family on paper, Michelle murmured. Indeed, which makes this situation particularly delicate. Janet closed the file and met Michelle's eyes. What exactly are you asking for? Michelle took a deep breath. I want permission to observe more closely, to create opportunities for one-on-one interaction with Madison during quiet time. And she hesitated, knowing her next request would push boundaries. I'd like to use the activity camera to document interactions during pickup and drop-off. Janet's eyebrows rose. You know those cameras are installed for security purposes only. Using them for surveillance of families crosses ethical lines. I know. But Janet, something is very wrong in that house. Every instinct I have, every year of experience, tells me that child is in danger. Not the obvious kind, not like Tommy Sullivan. Something more insidious. The older woman studied Michelle's face, seeing the determination etched in every line. The wall clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking seconds that felt like hours. "I had a case once," Janet said finally, her voice distant with memory. "Before you came to work here. A little girl named Rebecca. Perfect family, pillars of the community. I had concerns, but I hesitated. I told myself I needed more evidence, that I couldn't risk damaging their reputation without absolute proof." She paused, pain flickering across her features. "By the time I acted, it was too late. Rebecca ended up in the hospital with a skull fracture. She survived. But what happened to her? She's 35 now, lives in Burlington, works as a social worker. We exchange Christmas cards." Janet's smile was sad. "She told me once that she'd tried to tell me in her own way. Said she'd left me drawings, acted out during nap time, done everything she could think of to make me see. But I was too afraid of being wrong to trust what was right in front of me." The implication hung heavy in the air. Janet opened another drawer and withdrew a small key. "The activity camera in the art corner has the best angle of the entrance. It records to the cloud server, but only I have the access codes. If, and I emphasize if you find something concrete, we'll review it together before taking any action." Michelle accepted the key with trembling fingers. "Thank you, Janet. Don't thank me yet. This is dangerous territory we're entering. The Matthews aren't the kind of people who take kindly to scrutiny. Dr. Matthews sits on the hospital board, donates generously to local charities. Victoria's family connections run deep in New England society. If we're wrong, and if we're right," Janet's expression hardened, "then we do whatever it takes to protect that child. But Michelle, you must be absolutely certain before we act. Document everything, and be careful. People like the Matthews have resources we can't imagine." The next few days brought a shift in Michelle's approach to Madison. She created a special helper rotation that gave her legitimate reasons to spend individual time with each child. When it was Madison's turn, she used every moment to build trust, to create a safe space where the girl might feel comfortable enough to share her secrets. During art time, Michelle positioned herself at Madison's table, close enough to observe but not so close as to intrude. The other children created bright, cheerful pictures. Tommy drew rocket ships blasting off to Mars. The Wilson twins crafted elaborate princess castles. Jenny meticulously colored a family of Pokemon characters. Madison's artwork remained troublingly consistent. Dark colors, solitary figures, houses with blackened windows. On Thursday afternoon, while the other children napped, Michelle sat beside Madison at the art table. The girl was working on another drawing, her small hand gripping a black crayon with white-knuckled intensity. "That's an interesting picture, Madison," Michelle commented softly, careful not to startle her. "Can you tell me about it?" Madison glanced up, her hazel eyes wary. The bruise on her left arm had faded to a sickly yellow, but Michelle noticed fresh marks on her right wrist, faint, but unmistakable. "It's just a house," Madison mumbled, returning to her coloring. "Whose house is it?" The child hesitated, her crayon hovering over the paper. "Nobody's." "I see. And why are all the windows dark?" Madison's hand trembled slightly. "Because nobody's home." "Where did everybody go?" "Away," the girl whispered. "Far away where nobody can find them." Michelle felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you ever wish you could go far away, Madison?" The child's response was to press harder with her crayon, coloring with such force that the paper began to tear. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Sometimes people need to hide," she said, her voice barely audible. "To be safe." Before Michelle could respond, Madison quickly added, "In stories, like in fairy tales." It was a clear retreat, a child's attempt to mask a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. Michelle recognized the deflection but didn't push. Trust had to be earned slowly, carefully. "You're right," she said gently. "In stories, sometimes people do need to hide. But in real life, there are people who can help keep children safe. People like teachers and police officers and social workers." Madison's reaction was immediate and alarming. She dropped her crayon and backed away from the table, her small body trembling. "I don't need help," she insisted, her voice rising with panic. "I'm fine. Everything's fine." "Okay, sweetie. It's okay." Michelle kept her voice calm and soothing. "Why don't we read a story instead? Would you like to choose a book?" The incident left Michelle deeply troubled. That evening, she reviewed the day's camera footage, paying particular attention to the morning drop-off. Victoria had arrived at precisely 7:45, as she did every day. The recording showed her entering with Madison, their interaction brief and businesslike. But Michelle noticed something she'd missed in person: the way Victoria gripped Madison's shoulder as they walked, her fingers digging into the child's flesh even through her coat. Friday brought another disturbing observation. During outdoor play, Michelle watched as Madison sat alone on the bench, observing the other children with longing but making no attempt to join them. When Tommy Parker fell from the climbing structure and skinned his knee, the girl's reaction was extreme. She curled into herself, covering her head with her arms, rocking slightly back and forth. "Blood means trouble," Michelle heard her whisper. "Blood always means trouble." That afternoon, Michelle decided to try a different approach. She brought out a set of therapeutic dolls during quiet time, a family set with removable clothes and movable limbs. Most children used them for imaginative play, creating elaborate domestic scenarios. Madison's use of the dolls was markedly different. She arranged them carefully, the mother doll in one corner, the father doll in another, and the child doll in the middle. Then she proceeded to act out a scene that made Michelle's blood run cold. The parent dolls took turns pulling at the child doll, their movements rough and aggressive. The child doll was made to cower, to hide, to plead silently for the conflict to stop. "What's happening in your story, Madison?" Michelle asked carefully. The girl startled, as if she'd forgotten she wasn't alone. "Nothing," she said quickly, sweeping the dolls aside. "Just playing." That weekend, Michelle spent hours researching child psychology, signs of abuse, and intervention strategies. She reached out to a former colleague who now worked in child protective services, seeking advice without revealing specific details. "The hardest cases are the ones where you know something's wrong but can't prove it," her friend told her. "Keep documenting, look for patterns, and trust your instincts. Children find ways to tell us what they can't say directly." Monday morning arrived with a breakthrough. Madison approached Michelle during circle time, clutching a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you," she whispered, pressing it into Michelle's hand. "But you can't look at it now. Promise." "I promise," Michelle assured her, tucking the paper into her pocket. She waited until lunch break to unfold it in the privacy of the office. The drawing showed 3 figures: an adult with yellow hair, clearly Victoria, an adult with dark hair, Nathan, and a small figure with brown hair, Madison. They appeared to be in a kitchen. The blonde figure held what looked like a knife, while the dark-haired figure stood with raised fists. The child figure was crying, red tears streaming down her face. At the bottom, in shaky letters, Madison had written, "Mommy says Daddy will hurt us. Daddy says Mommy is lying. Who is telling the truth?" Michelle's hands shook as she photographed the drawing for her records. This was the closest thing to a disclosure Madison had offered, but it raised more questions than answers. Was this about fear of future harm or documentation of past events? Was one parent abusing Madison while the other tried to protect her? Or was something even more complex happening? She called CPS again that afternoon, reading them the message word for word. "It's concerning," the social worker agreed, "but without evidence of actual harm or direct disclosure from the child, we can't intervene. Keep documenting. If she tells you anything specific about abuse, call us immediately." Tuesday brought more unsettling behavior. Madison refused to eat lunch, pushing her sandwich around her plate in listless circles. When Michelle gently asked if she wasn't hungry, the girl replied, "Mommy says I'm getting fat. Daddy says I'm too skinny. I don't know what I'm supposed to be." The comment revealed a dynamic Michelle hadn't fully considered: the child caught between conflicting parental expectations, each parent using her as a weapon against the other. Wednesday afternoon, While the other children played outside, Madison stayed behind, claiming a stomachache. Michelle used the opportunity to sit with her, offering ginger ale and crackers. "Sometimes our tummies hurt when we're worried about something," Michelle said conversationally. "Is anything worrying you, Madison?" The girl was silent for a long moment, sipping her ginger ale. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. "Do you think grown-ups can be monsters?" Michelle chose her words carefully. "What do you mean by monsters?" "In stories, monsters are always ugly and scary. But what if they look normal? What if they look nice but do mean things when nobody's watching?" "That's a very thoughtful question," Michelle replied. "I think sometimes people who do bad things can look very normal on the outside. That's why it's important to tell a trusted adult if someone is hurting you or scaring you, even if that person seems nice to everyone else." Madison nodded slowly, processing this information. But what if telling makes everything worse? What if the monsters get angry? Then other adults, like police officers or social workers, can help keep you safe. No child should have to face monsters alone. The conversation was interrupted by the return of the other children, but Michelle felt they'd made progress. Madison was beginning to trust her, to test the waters of disclosure. Thursday brought a disturbing incident during pickup time. Nathan Matthews arrived earlier than usual, clearly agitated. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, hair mussed, a coffee stain on his white shirt. "Where's Madison?" he demanded, barely acknowledging Michelle's greeting. "She's in the reading corner, Dr. Matthews. I'll get her." "Now," he snapped, his charming facade completely gone. "We're running late." Michelle called for Madison, watching as the child emerged from behind a bookshelf. The camera captured what Michelle saw in person, pure terror flashing across the girl's face before she composed herself. "Hurry up," Nathan barked. "Your mother's waiting in the car." As Madison gathered her things, Michelle noticed her hands trembling so badly she could barely zip her backpack. When Nathan reached to help her, she flinched violently, dropping her lunchbox. "Clumsy," Nathan muttered, but Michelle caught the look he gave his daughter, a warning, a threat. After they left, Michelle immediately reviewed the footage, her heart pounding. She called Janet, who came to watch the recording. "This is escalating," Janet observed grimly. "Whatever's happening in that house, it's getting worse." Friday morning, Michelle sent another email to Janet. Request for parent-teacher conference with the Matthews. Urgent concerns to discuss. The conference was scheduled for the following Friday at 3 p.m. Michelle spent the week preparing, gathering evidence, organizing her documentation. She also worked to strengthen her bond with Madison, creating a foundation of trust that might encourage the girl to speak more openly. On the Monday before the conference, Madison left another drawing on Michelle's desk. This one showed a small figure trapped inside what looked like a glass box. Two larger figures stood on either side, their faces angry, their hands pressed against the glass. The child figure inside was crying, her tears forming a puddle at her feet. Tuesday brought another revealing comment. During snack time, Madison whispered to Michelle, "If I'm really good, maybe they'll stop fighting. If I'm perfect, maybe everything will be okay." The words broke Michelle's heart. No child should carry the burden of their parents' dysfunction. Wednesday afternoon, Madison asked the question that would haunt Michelle's dreams. "Ms. Robinson, if someone tells you a secret that's scary, do you have to tell their parents?" Michelle weighed her response carefully. "It depends on the secret. If someone is being hurt or might get hurt, then grown-ups need to know so they can help." Madison's lower lip trembled. "Even if telling makes things worse?" "Madison," Michelle knelt to eye level, her voice gentle but urgent. "Is someone hurting you?" For a moment, the child's careful facade cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, and she opened her mouth to speak. But then Rachel called out that Nathan had arrived for pickup, and the moment shattered. Madison fled to gather her things, leaving Michelle with the certainty that she was running out of time. Thursday night, Michelle called CPS again, pleading for guidance. "You're doing everything right," the social worker assured her. Keep documenting. The conference tomorrow might provide the breakthrough you need. If you witness anything concerning, call us immediately. Friday morning dawned gray and ominous. Michelle arrived at the center 2 hours early, checking and double-checking the conference room camera. She organized Madison's artwork chronologically, each piece telling part of a story she was only beginning to understand. Throughout the day, Madison shadowed her, unusually clingy and anxious. She barely touched her lunch and spent most of free time sitting in Michelle's lap, seeking comfort like a much younger child. "They're both coming today," Madison whispered as 3 p.m. approached. "They never both come. Something bad is going to happen. Would you like to help me set up the art display for the conference?" Michelle offered, thinking it might distract her. Madison's reaction was extreme. "No!" she cried, loud enough to draw attention from across the room. "Please, you can't show them my pictures. Please, Ms. Robinson. They'll know I told." The desperation in her voice made Michelle's decision for her. "Okay, sweetie. I won't show them your artwork. I promise." At 3:15 p.m., the Matthews arrived. Victoria entered first, immaculate as always in a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than Michelle's monthly salary. Nathan followed, his white coat exchanged for a casual blazer that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. Michelle settled them in the conference room, acutely aware of the hidden camera capturing every moment. She began with standard observations about Madison's academic progress, watching their reactions carefully. "Madison's reading comprehension is excellent," she said, keeping her voice professional. "She's performing above grade level in most areas." Victoria nodded approvingly. "We've always emphasized education in our home. Nathan reads to her every night." Through the window, Michelle could see Madison in the main room, curled into herself on a beanbag chair, and noticed her flinch at her mother's words. "However," Michelle continued, "I have some concerns about her social-emotional development." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Nathan's expression tightened, while Victoria's perfectly manicured nails began tapping against the table. "What kind of concerns?" Nathan asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Madison seems unusually withdrawn. She rarely interacts with other children and appears anxious during transitions, particularly at pickup time." "She's always been shy," Victoria said smoothly. "It's just her personality. Not every child needs to be a social butterfly." "Perhaps," Michelle pressed on, knowing she was entering dangerous territory, "but I've also noticed some physical signs that concern me. The bruising on her arms, for instance." Nathan's laugh was forced, too loud in the small room. "As we've explained before, Madison's quite clumsy. She takes after her mother in that regard." He shot Victoria a look that made her lips thin into a tight line. "I understand that children get bumps and bruises, but the pattern and frequency of Madison's injuries are unusual and concerning." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's tapping grew more aggressive, while Nathan's jaw clenched visibly. "Are you suggesting something, Ms. Robinson?" Victoria's voice had turned ice-cold, all pretense of pleasantness gone. Michelle met her gaze steadily. "I'm expressing concern for Madison's well-being. As her caregiver, it's my responsibility to ensure she's safe both here and at home." Nathan leaned forward, his doctor persona firmly in place, but his eyes held something darker. "I assure you, as a pediatrician, I'm well aware of what constitutes normal childhood injuries versus other concerns. Madison is perfectly safe at home. Then perhaps you can explain why she flinches when you arrive for pickup? Or why she's drawn multiple pictures of figures with injuries similar to her own." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Victoria's composure cracked slightly, a flash of something. Anger? Fear? Crossing her face before she regained control. "This meeting is over," she announced, standing abruptly. "We'll be considering whether Sunshine Learning Center is the right fit for our daughter." As they turned to leave, Nathan paused at the door. His voice was low, menacing. "Ms. Robinson, I'd be very careful about making unfounded accusations. They can have serious consequences. The threat was unmistakable. After they left, Michelle sat in the empty conference room, her heart pounding. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. But as she replayed the conversation in her mind, one thing became crystal clear: the Matthews were hiding something. She just had to figure out what before it was too late for Madison. That evening, reviewing the conference footage with Janet, they both noticed something they'd missed in the moment. During the heated exchange, Victoria had grabbed Nathan's arm, her nails digging in hard enough to leave marks. He'd winced but hadn't pulled away. "Look at that dynamic," Janet murmured. "It's not what we expected, is it?" Michelle rewound the footage, studying it again. "No, it's not. But whatever's happening in that house, Madison's caught in the middle of it." They sat in contemplative silence, both knowing that the conference had likely escalated whatever situation existed in the Matthews household. "What's our next move?" Janet asked. Michelle's response was immediate. "We watch, we wait, and we keep that camera rolling." Neither of them could have predicted what that camera would capture just 5 days later. A conversation that would shatter their assumptions and trigger a chain of events none of them could stop. The truth about Madison's silent bruises was about to surface, and it would prove more horrifying than anything they had imagined. The weekend following the disastrous parent-teacher conference stretched before Michelle like an endless highway. Saturday morning found her at her small apartment in downtown Maple Glen, surrounded by case files, child psychology textbooks, and pages of handwritten notes spread across her coffee table. The autumn rain drummed steadily against her windows, creating a melancholic soundtrack to her racing thoughts. Her living room had transformed into a makeshift investigation center. Yellow sticky notes covered one wall, connected by red string in a pattern that would have seemed paranoid to anyone else. Each note contained an observation, a date, a quote from Madison, or a description of bruises. The overall picture was disturbing but incomplete, like a jigsaw puzzle with crucial pieces missing. The coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen, producing her 4th pot of the morning. Michelle's eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she couldn't rest. Not when a child's life might hang in the balance. She picked up her phone and dialed her mentor, Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a child psychologist she'd studied under during her certification. "Michelle, it's 7 in the morning on a Saturday," came the groggy response. "I know, I'm sorry, but I need your advice. I have a situation with a child at the center, and I'm afraid I'm running out of time." Dr. Hayes must have heard the desperation in her voice because her tone immediately shifted to professional alertness. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Michelle outlined Madison's case, describing the bruises, the behavior changes, the drawings, and the confrontational conference with the Matthews. Dr. Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally making thoughtful sounds. "You're in a difficult position, Dr. Hayes said finally. "The Matthews are textbook examples of high-functioning abusers, if your suspicions are correct. They have social standing, professional credentials, and they know how to present the right image to the world. So what do I do? CPS won't intervene without more concrete evidence. The parents are threatening to remove Madison from the center. And if they do, then you lose your ability to monitor the situation." Dr. Hayes finished. "Michelle, have you considered the possibility that the dynamic might be more complex than simple parent-child abuse?" "What do you mean?" "In some cases, what appears to be straightforward abuse can mask deeper family dysfunction. Sometimes one parent uses the child as a weapon against the other. Sometimes both parents are involved in ways that aren't immediately apparent." The conversation left Michelle with more questions than answers. She spent the rest of Saturday creating detailed timelines, cross-referencing incidents with parent behaviors, looking for patterns she might have missed. By Sunday afternoon, cabin fever and anxiety drove her to the center. The building felt different, empty, the silence amplified by the absence of children's laughter, the unused toys seeming to watch her with accusatory stares. The old Victorian house creaked and settled around her as she made her way to Janet's office. The security system beeped as she disabled it, the sound echoing through the empty hallways. She settled into Janet's leather chair and logged into the secure server where all surveillance footage was stored. She'd watched the conference recording countless times, but something nagged at her, a detail just beyond her grasp. On her 7th viewing, she found it. At the 17-minute mark, when Nathan had threatened her about serious consequences, Victoria's hand had twitched toward her purse. Not just a nervous gesture, Michelle realized, but a specific movement, as if reaching for something. Michelle zoomed in on the footage, enhancing the image quality. There, barely visible through the opening of Victoria's designer bag, was the edge of what looked like a digital recorder. She was recording the conversation, Michelle whispered to the empty room. But why? The implications sent chills down her spine. If Victoria was secretly recording her husband, what else was she documenting? And for what purpose? Monday morning arrived with an unexpected development. Victoria Matthews appeared alone at drop-off, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Her designer suit was slightly wrinkled, her makeup hastily applied, and most notably, she wore a silk Hermes scarf despite the unseasonably warm October morning. A scarf that didn't quite hide the purple bruising on her neck. Madison won't be attending today, Victoria announced without preamble, her voice carrying a brittle edge Michelle hadn't heard before. Michelle's instincts screamed danger. I'm sorry to hear that. What seems to be the problem? Just a stomach bug, Victoria replied, avoiding eye contact. Her fingers fidgeted with the scarf, pulling it higher. Nathan examined her this morning. She'll need a few days to recover. I see. Well, please let her know we miss her and hope she feels better soon. Would you like me to prepare some activities she can do at home? Victoria's laugh was sharp, almost hysterical. That won't be necessary. She needs rest, not more stimulation. As Victoria turned to leave, Michelle noticed her stumble slightly on the threshold. The woman caught herself on the doorframe, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. In that instant, Michelle saw something she hadn't expected. Not the cold calculation of an abuser, but raw, primal fear. Mrs. Matthews, Michelle called out impulsively. If you need help, any kind of help. Victoria stiffened, her mask sliding back into place. I don't know what you mean. Good day, Ms. Robinson. Tuesday passed with agonizing slowness and no word from the Matthews. Michelle called their home 3 times under various pretexts, checking on Madison's condition, offering to send homework, inquiring about when to expect her return. Each call went to voicemail. Her messages remained unreturned. That evening, Michelle broke protocol and drove past the Matthews house. The colonial-style home stood dark and silent in Maple Heights, the affluent neighborhood that housed the town's elite. No cars in the driveway, no lights in the windows. Even the motion sensor security lights remained dark as she slowly cruised past. Wednesday morning brought Rachel bursting into the center, her young face pale with worry and excitement. Michelle, you're not going to believe this, she gasped, barely pausing to catch her breath. I saw Dr. Matthews at Walgreens last night. He didn't see me. I was in the next aisle looking at cold medicine. But Michelle, he was buying first aid supplies. Lots of them. What kind of supplies? Michelle asked, her heart rate accelerating. Bandages, gauze, antiseptic, those butterfly closures for deep cuts, medical tape. He had a whole basket full. And he was on his phone arguing with someone. I heard him say, she needs to learn to keep her mouth shut. Then something about taking care of it permanently. Michelle's blood ran cold. Did you hear anything else? He mentioned something about the cabin and where no one will hear. Michelle, what if he's planning to hurt Madison? Or Victoria? After documenting Rachel's account and verifying she had no direct evidence of immediate danger, Michelle made another call to CPS. This time, she reached a different social worker, James Martinez, who seemed more receptive to her concerns. The situation is escalating, Michelle explained, detailing the latest developments. I'm worried we're running out of time. I understand your concern, Martinez replied, but without direct access to the child or evidence of immediate danger, our hands are tied. The Matthews are prominent citizens. Dr. Matthews sits on several hospital boards. We need ironclad evidence before we can intervene. What if I could get that evidence? Ms. Robinson, I can't advise you to do anything illegal. But if you happen to come across concrete proof of abuse, we can act immediately. The conversation left Michelle with a difficult decision. That night, she met with Janet at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes and potential eavesdroppers. I want to install better cameras, Michelle said without preamble. My brother works in security. He has equipment that's virtually undetectable, with crystal clear audio and remote activation. Janet stirred her coffee slowly, her expression troubled. Michelle, we're entering dangerous territory. If the Matthews discover we're surveilling them beyond normal security measures, then what? They'll sue? Take their child away? Janet, that little girl is in danger. Real, immediate danger. I can feel it in my bones. You felt that way about the Sullivan case too, Janet reminded her gently. And I was right then. I'm right now. Janet sighed heavily. All right, but we do this carefully, legally. The cameras can only cover public areas of the center. No bathrooms, no private offices. And we document everything as standard security upgrades. Thursday night, after the center closed, Michelle and her brother Alex worked quickly to install the new system. The cameras were tiny, hidden in smoke detectors, wall clocks, and picture frames, each one capable of capturing high-definition video and audio, with night vision and motion activation. This is some serious spy stuff, sis, Alex commented as he synced the system to Michelle's phone. You sure about this? No, Michelle admitted. But I'm sure about that little girl needing help. Friday morning dawned gray and ominous. Michelle arrived at the center before sunrise, testing the new cameras and ensuring everything was operational. She just finished when the bell above the door chimed at 7:30 a.m., unusual for such an early arrival. Victoria Matthews entered alone, looking worse than before. Her designer clothes hung loosely on her frame, as if she'd lost weight rapidly. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands shook visibly as she clutched her Prada purse. Mrs. Matthews, Michelle greeted, trying to hide her surprise. Is Madison feeling better? I need to speak with you, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted around the empty center as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. Privately, now. Michelle led her to the conference room, surreptitiously activating the new camera system with her phone. Victoria paced the small space like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in an erratic rhythm. You were right, Victoria burst out suddenly, the words tumbling over each other. About Madison, about everything. But it's so much worse than you know. Michelle's training kicked in. She gestured for Victoria to sit, positioning herself between the woman and the door. I'm listening. Victoria's carefully constructed facade crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. She sank into a chair, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face, leaving mascara trails on her cheeks. Nathan. He's not who everyone thinks he is. The respected pediatrician, the loving father. It's all an act. A perfectly crafted illusion. Tell me what's happening, Victoria. Let me help. The woman reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out not the digital recorder Michelle had spotted in the footage, but a small tablet. I've been documenting everything. For months now. Look. She opened a folder filled with photos, images of Madison's bruises from multiple angles, clearly taken at home. There were videos too. Nathan berating Madison for minor infractions, grabbing her roughly, throwing objects in anger. Text message exchanges filled with threats and manipulation. These texts, Michelle said, studying the screen carefully. They're from Nathan to you? Yes. He's been threatening me for months. Says if I leave him, if I tell anyone what he's doing to Madison, he'll make sure I never see her again. He knows judges, lawyers, police officers. His connections run deep in this town. Michelle examined the photos more closely. These bruises on Madison, they're all from Nathan? Victoria nodded, her sobs growing more violent. He calls it discipline. Says she needs to learn respect, obedience. But it's getting worse. The other night he used his belt. left welts across her back. I tried to stop him, but she gestured to her neck, where the bruises peeked out from beneath her scarf. Where is Madison now? At home. With him. Victoria's voice cracked with desperation. I had to leave her there. He said if I tried to take her, he'd hurt her worse. He's keeping her home from school, from daycare. Says it's to hide the bruises, but I think he's planning something terrible. Michelle's mind raced. Victoria, we need to call the police. Child Protective Services. Now. No! Victoria grabbed Michelle's arm with surprising strength, her manicured nails digging into flesh. You don't understand. He's planned for this. He's been telling everyone I'm unstable, that I have a history of mental illness. He's documented my erratic behavior, twisted everything to make me look like the dangerous one. But with these photos, these videos, he'll say I fabricated them, that I'm trying to frame him because I want full custody in the divorce. Victoria's laugh was bitter, hollow. He's a master manipulator. Everyone believes him. Even I believed him for years. Before Michelle could respond, her phone buzzed with an alert from the center's security system. Motion detected at the front entrance. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart stop. Nathan Matthews was approaching the building, his face a mask of barely contained rage. He knows I'm here, Victoria whispered, terror evident in every word. He must have tracked my phone. Oh God, Michelle, he's gonna kill me. He's going to kill us both. Michelle made a split-second decision. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me or the police. She stepped into the hallway just as Nathan burst through the front door. His usually immaculate appearance was gone, shirt untucked, tie askew, hair disheveled. His eyes were wild with fury, the carefully maintained facade of the respected physician completely shattered. Where is she? He demanded, advancing toward Michelle with predatory intent. Where's my wife? Dr. Matthews, please calm down. This is a place of business. Don't play games with me, he snarled, spittle flying from his lips. I know she's here. I know what she's been telling you. Lies. All lies from a deranged woman. Michelle stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Years of dealing with volatile parents had taught her the importance of remaining calm in crisis situations. Where's Madison, Dr. Matthews? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, then calculation. She's at home where she belongs, safe from her mother's delusions and paranoid fantasies. Is she really safe? Or is she covered in bruises, too scared to speak? Nathan's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing Michelle by the shoulders and slamming her against the wall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, and she felt picture frames rattle behind her head. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he hissed, his face inches from hers. She could smell coffee and something medicinal on his breath. Victoria is sick. She's been hurting Madison, blaming it on me. I've been trying to protect my daughter, but people like you with your misguided assumptions and hero complexes. The conference room door flew open with a bang. Victoria stood there, phone in hand, her face a mask of determination despite the fear in her eyes. I've called 911, she announced, her voice shaking but loud. They're on their way. Nathan released Michelle and turned on his wife with animal fury. You stupid bitch, he growled. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed everything. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Nathan charged toward Victoria with murderous intent. Michelle, acting on pure instinct, grabbed the nearest heavy object, a ceramic vase filled with artificial flowers, a Mother's Day gift from last year's class, and brought it down on the back of his head with all her strength. The vase shattered on impact. Nathan crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Blood seeped from the wound, staining the cheerful alphabet rug the children played on every day. The sight of red spreading across the letters made Michelle's stomach lurch. Oh God, Victoria whispered, pressing her hand to her mouth. Is he dead? Michelle knelt beside Nathan's prone form, her EMT training kicking in automatically. She checked his pulse with trembling fingers, felt the steady beat beneath his skin, observed the rise and fall of his chest. No, just unconscious. The police will be here soon. We need to make sure Madison is safe. Victoria slumped against the wall, all energy draining from her body. She's not at home, she confessed, her voice barely audible. I lied to him. I left her with my sister in Burlington last night. I couldn't leave her alone with him anymore. Relief flooded through Michelle, followed quickly by confusion. But you said he was keeping her home. I drugged his coffee yesterday morning, Victoria admitted. Sleeping pills. Enough to keep him unconscious while I got Madison out. I knew I had one chance to save her. The sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as emergency vehicles approached. Within minutes, the center was swarming with police officers and paramedics. Nathan was strapped to a gurney, still unconscious, blood soaking through the temporary bandage the EMTs had applied. Detective Sarah Winters, a veteran of the Maple Glen Police Department, took charge of the scene. Michelle had met her during the Sullivan case, remembered her thoroughness and compassion. Ms. Robinson, Detective Winters said, pulling out her notepad. Why don't you tell me what happened here? For the next hour, Michelle recounted everything, her initial concerns about Madison, the documented bruises, the behavioral changes, the conference with the Matthews, and finally, the morning's violent confrontation. Victoria provided her own statement, showing the detective the photos and videos she'd collected. As the crime scene investigators photographed the blood-stained rug and collected pieces of the broken vase, Michelle noticed something on the floor where Nathan had fallen, a small black notebook that must have slipped from his pocket during the altercation. She discreetly pointed it out to Detective Winters. What's this? Winters murmured, picking up the notebook with gloved hands. She flipped through the pages, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Michelle, you need to see this. The notebook was filled with meticulous notes in Nathan's precise handwriting. But they weren't what Michelle expected. Instead of documenting Madison's supposed misbehaviors or justifications for discipline, the pages contained detailed accounts of injuries not inflicted on Madison, but on Nathan and Victoria herself. October 15th. Victoria struck me with a wine bottle during an argument about Madison's dance recital. 3 stitches required. Told hospital staff I fell while cleaning gutters. September 22nd. Found Victoria punishing Madison for spilling juice. Intervened. She attacked me with kitchen knife. Defensive wound on left forearm. Photographed evidence. August 8th. Victoria's episode worse today. Locked Madison in closet for 4 hours while I was at work. Child traumatized. Victoria claims no memory of incident. Page after page documented a pattern of abuse, but not the pattern they'd assumed. At the bottom of each entry, Nathan had written the same chilling phrase. She's getting worse. Must protect Madison. Michelle looked up at Victoria, who was now surrounded by officers, painting herself as the protective mother who'd finally found the courage to expose her abusive husband. The woman's tears, her fear, her desperate pleas for help, had it all been an act? There's more, Detective Winters said grimly. She led Michelle to a quiet corner and showed her the notebook's final pages. Look at these entries from last week. November 1st. Discovered Victoria's plan. She's been documenting false evidence for months. Photos staged, videos edited. Planning to accuse me of abuse, gain full custody, access to life insurance. Madison in grave danger. November 3rd. Confronted Victoria. She became violent. Threatened to kill Madison if I exposed her. Must find way to protect my daughter without triggering Victoria's rage. November 5th. Taking Madison to cabin this weekend. Only way to keep her safe while I gather evidence. Victoria must not suspect. The implications hit Michelle like a physical blow. She staggered, grabbing the detective's arm for support. I've been wrong, she whispered. All this time I've been wrong. What followed was a series of revelations that shattered their understanding of the Matthews family. Crime scene technicians found Victoria's tablet, still logged into her photo editing software. Analysis revealed that many of the abuse photos had been digitally altered. The videos, while real, had been selectively edited to remove context. A search of the Matthews home uncovered more evidence. Hidden cameras installed by Nathan showed Victoria's violent outbursts, her manipulation of Madison, her careful staging of injuries. Bank records revealed she'd been slowly draining their joint accounts, preparing for a divorce that would leave Nathan destitute and Madison in her complete control. The most damning evidence came from Madison herself. Child psychologists interviewed her in Burlington, away from both parents. In a safe environment, the truth finally emerged. "Mommy says Daddy is bad," Madison told the psychologist, her small voice captured on video. "She says if I tell anyone what she does, Daddy will go to jail and I'll never see him again. She makes me practice being scared of him when other people are watching." The child revealed years of psychological manipulation and physical abuse at Victoria's hands. The bruises Michelle had documented were real but inflicted by Victoria during her episodes. Periods of rage triggered by alcohol and untreated bipolar disorder. "Daddy tries to protect me," Madison continued, tears streaming down her face. "He takes me to the cabin when Mommy gets really bad. But she always finds us. She always makes us come back." As the investigation deepened, a complex picture emerged. Victoria Pembroke Matthews suffered from severe mental illness, exacerbated by alcohol abuse and the pressure of maintaining her perfect facade. Her family's wealth and connections had helped hide her condition for years, enabling her to continue the cycle of abuse. Nathan, contrary to Michelle's assumptions, had been desperately trying to protect his daughter while gathering evidence against his wife. His aggressive behavior, his threats during the conference, all born from the frustration of a man who knew his wife was setting him up and felt powerless to stop it. The case made national headlines. Daycare worker uncovers shocking truth behind perfect family facade. Michelle found herself at the center of a media storm, praised for her vigilance while simultaneously criticized for her initial misreading of the situation. Victoria was charged with child abuse, domestic violence, attempted fraud, and assault. Her family's lawyers mounted an insanity defense, arguing that her untreated mental illness absolved her of responsibility. The trial lasted 3 months, with Michelle testifying about her observations and the events leading to the confrontation. Nathan recovered from his head injury but took an extended leave from the hospital. He focused entirely on Madison's recovery, working with therapists to undo years of psychological damage. The cabin he'd mentioned in his notebook became their temporary refuge, a place to heal away from the memories of their former life. On the day Victoria was sentenced to 15 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment, Michelle visited Nathan and Madison at the cabin. The remote location offered privacy and peace, surrounded by the vibrant colors of autumn foliage. Madison was in therapy 3 times a week, slowly learning to trust again. She greeted Michelle shyly, clutching a stuffed animal, a gift from her therapist to help her feel safe. "Thank you," Nathan said, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of gratitude and lingering pain. "If you hadn't noticed something was wrong, if you hadn't cared enough to look deeper, I almost got it completely wrong," Michelle admitted, guilt heavy in her voice. "I saw what Victoria wanted me to see. If she hadn't panicked, hadn't made mistakes in her desperation. But you kept looking. You trusted your instincts that something wasn't right, even if you initially misunderstood what it was. That's what matters." Madison approached them, holding out a new drawing. Unlike her previous dark artwork, this one burst with color, a house with open windows, flowers in the garden, and 3 figures holding hands. She'd drawn herself in the middle, with Nathan on one side and Michelle on the other. "I made this for you, Ms. Robinson," she said softly, "because you helped us find the truth." As Michelle accepted the drawing, tears blurred her vision. She thought about the complexities of family violence, about how abusers can hide behind perfect facades, and how sometimes the most obvious explanation isn't the correct one. She thought about the responsibility that comes with noticing when something is wrong, and the courage it takes to act on those observations. Months later, the Sunshine Learning Center implemented new protocols based on the Matthews case. All staff underwent advanced training in recognizing various forms of abuse and manipulation. The camera system was upgraded with proper legal safeguards, and a child advocacy specialist was added to the staff. Michelle continued working at the center, but with a deeper understanding of the complexities of family dynamics and the various forms that abuse can take. She kept Madison's drawing framed on her desk, a reminder that sometimes the truth hides behind closed doors, wearing an unexpected face, and that vigilance means being willing to question even our own assumptions. The Matthews case became a cautionary tale in the child protection community, highlighting the dangers of confirmation bias and the importance of thorough investigation. It demonstrated that abuse doesn't always follow predictable patterns, and that the most dangerous predators are often those who appear the most innocent. For Michelle, it reinforced the lesson Ms. Hammond had taught her years ago, that protecting children requires not just observation, but the wisdom to see beyond the obvious, the courage to challenge assumptions, and the humility to admit when you've been deceived. As autumn turned to winter and the first snow fell on Maple Glen, life at the center returned to a semblance of normalcy. But Michelle never forgot the lesson she'd learned. Sometimes the monsters were beautiful masks, and sometimes the victims look like villains until you learn to see the truth hiding in plain sight. A year later, Michelle received a letter from Nathan. Madison was thriving in her new school, making friends, rediscovering the joy of childhood. They'd moved to a different state, started fresh. The letter included a photo of Madison at her 9th birthday party, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. "She still talks about you," Nathan wrote, "about how you were the first person to notice something was wrong, even if you didn't understand what it was at first. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up, to help other kids the way you helped her." Michelle placed the photo next to Madison's drawing, twin testaments to the power of vigilance and the complexity of truth. Outside her window, children played in the snow, their laughter echoing through the center. She watched them carefully, as she always would, knowing that sometimes the most important truths are the ones that hide in plain sight, waiting for someone with the courage to uncover them. The aftermath of Nathan Matthews' collapse turned the Sunshine Learning Center into a crime scene. Yellow police tape cordoned off the entrance, while forensic technicians photographed every angle of the blood-stained alphabet rug. Outside, news vans from Burlington and even Boston crowded the narrow street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray November sky like mechanical flowers seeking an absent sun. Detective Sarah Winters sat across from Michelle in Janet's office, her notebook open and pen poised. At 45, Winters had seen her share of domestic violence cases, but something about this one had put deep lines of concern across her forehead. "Let me make sure I understand the sequence of events," she said, her voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to unraveling complicated truths. "Mrs. Matthews came to you this morning, claimed her husband was abusing both her and Madison, showed you photographs and videos as evidence." "Yes," Michelle confirmed, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She was terrified. She said Nathan had been threatening her, that he had connections that would prevent anyone from believing her. Winters nodded, making notes. "And then Dr. Matthews arrived, became violent, and you struck him with the vase in self-defense." "That's correct." "What happened to the tablet Mrs. Matthews showed you? The one with the evidence?" Michelle frowned. I don't know. Everything happened so fast. She must have taken it with her when the police arrived." A uniformed officer appeared in the doorway. "Detective, we found something you need to see." Winters excused herself, leaving Michelle alone with her thoughts. Through the office window, she could see Victoria Matthews in the conference room, surrounded by officers and her high-powered attorney, a silver-haired man in a $1,000 suit who'd arrived within minutes of the 911 call. Victoria was the picture of distraught victimhood, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief while gesturing animatedly. Something about the scene troubled Michelle deeply. The tablet Victoria had shown her, the photos had been compelling, the videos disturbing. But now, thinking back, certain details nagged at her. The angles of some photos had seemed odd, almost staged. And the video of Nathan berating Madison. Had there been a slight jump in the footage, as if it had been edited? Detective Winters returned, her expression grim. In her gloved hands, she held a small black notebook. "We found this in Dr. Matthew's pocket," she said, sitting back down. "Michelle, I think you need to read this." With trembling fingers, Michelle opened the notebook. Nathan's precise handwriting filled page after page, but the content made her blood run cold. These weren't the ravings of an abuser justifying his actions. They were the desperate documentation of a man trying to protect his child. June 15th. Victoria's episode lasted 3 hours. Found Madison locked in the bathroom, crying. Victoria claimed she was teaching her a lesson about lying. Bruises on Madison's arms from being dragged. Photographed injuries, saved to secure cloud account. July 22nd. Victoria intoxicated again. Threw Madison's dinner plate at the wall when she didn't eat fast enough. Cut on Madison's cheek from flying ceramic. Took her to urgent care, claimed she fell at playground. Dr. Peterson suspicious but no proof. August 30th. Discovered Victoria's plan. Found draft divorce papers and life insurance documents. She's been staging injuries, documenting false abuse claims. Fear for Madison's safety if Victoria gains full custody. Page after page revealed a horrifying pattern not of Nathan's abuse, but of Victoria's carefully orchestrated campaign to frame him while subjecting both husband and daughter to physical and psychological torment. "There's something else," Winters said, pulling out her phone. "The tech team accessed the center's new security system. The cameras you installed yesterday, they captured everything, including audio." She pressed play on a recording from that morning. Victoria's voice filled the office, but it was different from the terrified whispers Michelle remembered. This was calculated, rehearsed. "Remember what we practiced, darling?" Victoria was saying to someone off camera, presumably Madison, before she'd been sent to Burlington. "When the nice lady asks about your bruises, you tell her Daddy did it. Just like we talked about." Madison's small voice responded, trembling with fear. "But Mommy, lying is wrong, and Daddy doesn't." The sound of a slap cut through the speakers, followed by Madison's muffled sobs. "You'll do as you're told," Victoria hissed. "Unless you want something worse to happen. Remember what I told you about the basement." Michelle felt physically ill. She'd been manipulated by a master actress who'd used her own child as a prop in a sick performance. "We need to find Madison," she said urgently. Victoria said she was with her sister in Burlington, but what if? "Already on it," Winters assured her. "Burlington PD is heading to the sister's address now. But there's more you need to know." The detective pulled out another evidence bag containing a sleek tablet. Not the one Victoria had shown Michelle, but a different device entirely. "We found this hidden in Mrs. Matthew's car," Winters explained. "Our cybercrimes unit cracked it open. She's been planning this for months, Michelle. There's a detailed timeline, scripts for what to say to various officials, even practice videos of her rehearsing her terrified victim act." Michelle's head spun. But the bruises on her neck, the fear in her eyes, self-inflicted most likely, or she had help. "We're looking into whether she has an accomplice." Winters leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You couldn't have known. She fooled everyone, her husband, the school, even Child Protective Services in Boston before they moved here." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Nathan Matthews, conscious now despite the bandage wrapped around his head, was being wheeled past on a gurney. He caught sight of Michelle through the office window and called out weakly. "Please," he said as the EMTs paused. "Please tell me Madison is safe." Before Michelle could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Get away from him. He's dangerous. He'll kill us all." Her performance was flawless, the trembling voice, the wide eyes, the protective stance. But now Michelle could see the calculation behind it, the slight smirk that flickered across Victoria's face when she thought no one was looking. "Dr. Matthews," Detective Winters addressed Nathan, ignoring Victoria's outburst. "We found your notebook. We're reviewing all evidence, including the security footage from this morning. Relief washed over Nathan's pale features. "Thank God," he whispered. "I've been trying to protect Madison for so long, but no one would believe me. Victoria's family, their money, their connections. Save your strength," Winters advised. "We'll need your full statement once you're medically cleared." As the EMTs wheeled Nathan away, Victoria's attorney stepped forward, his voice dripping with professional menace. "My client has been through a traumatic ordeal. We'll be filing charges against Dr. Matthews for domestic violence, child abuse, and attempted murder. The evidence is irrefutable." "Is it?" Winters challenged, holding up the notebook. "Because I'm looking at evidence that tells a very different story." The attorney's composure cracked slightly. "Whatever fabrications you've found. Fabrications like this?" Winters played another audio clip from the morning's footage. Victoria's voice, cold and calculating. "Once Nathan's out of the picture, the insurance money will set us up nicely. $3 million buys a lot of fresh starts." The color drained from both Victoria's and her attorney's faces. "Victoria Matthews," Winters announced, "you're under arrest for child abuse, domestic violence, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." As officers led a suddenly hysterical Victoria away, Michelle sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed by the morning's revelations. Janet appeared beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," Janet assured her. "You saw a child in distress and took action. The fact that the situation was more complex than we realized doesn't change that." "But I almost helped her destroy that family," Michelle protested. "If Nathan hadn't shown up when he did, if I hadn't hit him and found that notebook, then we would have discovered the truth another way," Janet said firmly. "The important thing is that Madison is safe now." The phone on Janet's desk rang. Detective Winters answered, listened intently, then hung up with visible relief. "Burlington PD found Madison," she announced. "She's safe. Actually, she's been safe all along. Nathan had arranged for his sister, a child psychologist, to take her last night. Victoria lied about having her." Michelle felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "Can I see her? Talk to her?" "Soon," Winters promised. "But first, we need to process this crime scene and get your full statement. This case is going to be complicated." Over the next several hours, the truth continued to unravel like a dark tapestry. Crime scene technicians found Victoria's hidden stash of props, makeup for creating realistic bruises, a collection of recording devices, even a small vial of her own blood used to stage certain photographs. The security footage revealed more disturbing conversations, including one where Victoria had coached Madison on exactly what to say to Michelle about her bruises. The child's reluctance and fear were evident, as was Victoria's threatening response. A search of the Matthews home uncovered a hidden room, not the basement Victoria had used to terrorize Madison, but a small office where she'd planned her scheme. Wall charts detailed timelines, potential witnesses to manipulate, and step-by-step instructions for framing Nathan. A shelf held books on child psychology, domestic abuse indicators, and legal precedents in custody battles. Bank records showed systematic transfers to offshore accounts, dating back 2 years. Victoria had been slowly draining their joint assets, preparing for a divorce that would leave Nathan financially and emotionally devastated while she walked away with everything. The most chilling discovery came from Nathan's cloud storage account. He'd managed to install hidden cameras in their home, capturing Victoria's true nature when she thought no one was watching. The footage showed her violent outbursts, her manipulation of Madison, her calculated creation of evidence against Nathan. In one particularly disturbing video, Victoria was seen applying makeup bruises to Madison's arms while the child cried softly. "Stop sniveling," Victoria snapped. "You want to help Mommy, don't you? This is how we make sure the bad daddy goes away forever." As evening fell and the crime scene was finally cleared, Michelle sat with Detective Winters, reviewing the day's events for her official statement. The detective's phone buzzed with a message. "Nathan's been cleared for visitors," she said. "He's asking to see you." At Maple Glen Regional Hospital, Michelle found Nathan in a private room, his head bandaged but his eyes clear and alert for the first time since she'd known him. The defeated, aggressive man she'd encountered at the conference was gone, replaced by someone who finally felt safe enough to drop his defensive facade. "I'm sorry," were his first words to her, "for frightening you at the conference, for making you think I was the monster. I was desperate, running out of time. I knew Victoria was close to executing her plan." "I'm the one who should apologize," Michelle replied. "I saw what she wanted me to see. I almost helped her destroy your family." Nathan shook his head carefully, mindful of his injury. "You saw a child in distress and acted. That's more than most people would have done. Victoria fooled everyone, her family, our friends, therapists. She's very sick, but also very cunning." "How long has this been going on?" "The physical abuse started about 3 years ago, after her father died. He'd always been her stabilizing influence, kept her worst impulses in check. Without him, and with access to her inheritance, she spiraled. The plan to frame me began when I first suggested she needed professional help." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Matthews? There's a video call for you." Nathan's face lit up. "That must be Madison." The nurse wheeled in a tablet, and suddenly Madison's face filled the screen. She was in a cheerful bedroom, surrounded by stuffed animals, her aunt sitting beside her. "Daddy!" she cried, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Are you okay? Aunt Jennifer said you got hurt protecting me." "I'm fine, sweetheart," Nathan assured her. "Just a bump on the head. Are you safe? Are you happy with Aunt Jennifer?" Madison nodded vigorously. "She's nice. She doesn't yell or do the bad things Mommy did." Her expression grew serious. "Daddy, I told the truth. I told the police lady everything, just like you said to if anything happened. About how Mommy hurt us and made me lie." "You were very brave," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Madison's eyes found Michelle on the screen. "Ms. Robinson, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth before. Mommy said she'd hurt Daddy if I did." "It's okay, Madison," Michelle assured her. "You did the right thing when it mattered most. Will I see you again when I come back to school?" Michelle glanced at Nathan, who nodded slightly. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be here whenever you're ready to return." After the call ended, Nathan turned to Michelle with gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for not giving up, for continuing to look even when the truth wasn't clear. You saved my daughter's life, and mine." "What happens now?" Michelle asked. "Now we heal," Nathan replied. "Madison starts therapy to undo the damage Victoria caused. I rebuild my career and reputation, and we create a new life, one where Madison can just be a child again." As Michelle left the hospital, the weight of the day's revelations pressed heavy on her shoulders. She'd entered this case believing she was saving a child from an abusive father, only to discover that the real monster wore designer clothes and a practiced smile of victimhood. The parking lot was quiet, the media vans having departed for the evening news cycle. In the distance, she could see the lights of Maple Glen twinkling against the dark Vermont hills. Somewhere out there, Madison was safe with her aunt, beginning the long journey toward healing. Michelle's phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "The center's been cleaned. We'll reopen tomorrow. Parents are calling with questions. We'll need to address this carefully." Indeed, the aftermath of the Matthews case would ripple through their small community for months to come. There would be questions, investigations, and a complete overhaul of their child protection protocols. But for now, Michelle allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about the complexity of truth, the danger of assumptions, and the importance of remaining vigilant even when the story seems clear. She thought about Madison's drawings, which had been trying to tell the truth all along. If only someone had known how to interpret them correctly. As she drove home through the quiet streets of Maple Glen, Michelle made a silent promise to herself and to all the children in her care. She would never stop looking beneath the surface, never stop questioning her assumptions, and never stop fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The truth, she had learned, was rarely simple, but it was always worth pursuing, no matter how deeply it was buried behind closed doors. The late November air carried the scent of impending snow as Michelle stood before the crowded courtroom, her hand trembling on the polished wood of the witness stand. 3 months had passed since that fateful morning at the Sunshine Learning Center, and today, the truth would finally have its day in court. Victoria Matthews sat at the defense table, her appearance carefully crafted to suggest fragility and victimhood. Gone were the designer suits and perfect makeup, replaced by conservative dresses and minimal cosmetics. Her attorney, Maxwell Sterling, had orchestrated this transformation meticulously, part of their strategy to paint Victoria as a misunderstood woman suffering from mental illness. Ms. Robinson, the prosecutor, a stern woman named Margaret Chen, began. Please tell the court about your first concerns regarding Madison Matthews. As Michelle recounted the months of observation, the drawings, the behavioral changes, the bruises, she watched the jury's faces shift from sympathy to horror. The defense had tried to suppress the security footage, but Judge Harold Montgomery had ruled it admissible, calling it crucial evidence that speaks to the calculated nature of the defendant's actions. When the prosecution played the footage of Victoria coaching Madison to lie, several jurors gasped audibly. The recording of Victoria discussing insurance money and fresh starts caused one elderly woman to cover her mouth in disgust. The defense may argue that my client was mentally unstable, Chen stated in her closing argument, but these recordings show clear premeditation, careful planning, and the ability to distinguish right from wrong. This wasn't madness. It was malice. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Nathan testified about years of escalating abuse, his voice breaking as he described finding Madison locked in darkened rooms, hungry and terrified. Child psychologists presented their findings, detailing the extensive emotional trauma Madison had endured and the long road to recovery ahead. Perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Madison herself, delivered via closed-circuit television to protect her from facing her mother in person. The 9-year-old spoke clearly and carefully, describing how her mother had hurt her, threatened her, and forced her to lie. Mommy said if I told anyone, Daddy would go away forever, Madison said, her small voice carrying the weight of unbearable secrets. She said she'd make sure I never saw him again. But Ms. Robinson noticed anyway. She saw that something was wrong. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, child abuse, domestic violence, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, Victoria's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. She screamed obscenities at Nathan, at Michelle, at the jury, revealing the monster that had always lurked beneath the surface. "This isn't over," she shrieked as bailiffs restrained her. "You'll all pay for this. Nathan, you'll never be free of me. Never." The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later was brief but impactful. Judge Montgomery, known for his measured approach to justice, delivered an unusually harsh condemnation. "Mrs. Matthews," he said, his voice heavy with disgust, "you systematically tortured your child and spouse while manipulating everyone around you. You weaponized the very systems designed to protect families for your own gain. This court sentences you to 25 years in state prison, with mandatory psychiatric treatment." As Victoria was led away, still ranting about injustice, Michelle felt a profound sense of closure. The truth had prevailed, though at great cost to all involved. The months following the trial brought significant changes to Maple Glen. The Matthews case had exposed vulnerabilities in the system that protected children, leading to comprehensive reforms. The Vermont Department for Children and Families launched a statewide initiative to improve training for recognizing complex abuse patterns. Michelle was invited to speak at conferences, sharing her experience and emphasizing the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. The Sunshine Learning Center underwent its own transformation. With Janet's blessing, Michelle developed a new observation protocol that emphasized multiple perspectives and careful documentation. They hired Dr. Elena Vasquez, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, to work part-time with both staff and children. "We can't prevent all abuse," Dr. Vasquez explained during a staff training session, "but we can create environments where children feel safe enough to speak their truth, and where adults are equipped to understand what they're trying to tell us. The center also installed a more sophisticated security system, with proper legal safeguards and clear protocols for its use. They partnered with local law enforcement and child protection services to establish better communication channels and response procedures. The media attention gradually faded, though documentary filmmakers and true crime podcasters continued to reach out. Michelle declined all interviews, believing that Madison deserved privacy as she healed. 6 months after the trial, on a bright spring morning that smelled of melting snow and new beginnings, Michelle received a letter that made her heart swell with joy. Dear Ms. Robinson, we are writing to thank you for everything you did to protect our family. Madison has completed her initial therapy program and is making remarkable progress. She laughs again, plays with friends, and has even started taking art classes, though she now prefers watercolors to crayons. We've decided to move forward with our lives in a new city where we can start fresh, free from the shadows of the past. Madison wanted me to tell you that she's no longer afraid of the dark and that she drew you another picture, this one full of sunshine and rainbows. You were right to trust your instincts, even when the truth was hidden behind lies. Because of your courage, our daughter has a chance at the childhood she deserves. With eternal gratitude, Nathan and Madison Matthews. Inside the envelope was a photograph of Madison at her 10th birthday party, her smile radiant and genuine. Beside it was a vibrant watercolor painting, a teacher figure with kind eyes standing before a classroom of happy children, with "Thank you, Ms. Robinson" written in careful script across the bottom. Michelle framed both items and placed them on her desk, tangible reminders of why she'd chosen this profession. On the 1-year anniversary of the incident, Michelle organized a special assembly at the center. She invited Detective Winters, Dr. Vasquez, and representatives from Child Protective Services to create a panel discussion for parents about recognizing and reporting abuse. The Matthews case taught us that abuse doesn't always look like we expect, Michelle told the gathered parents. It can hide behind wealth, education, and charm. Our job is to create spaces where children feel safe to speak their truth, and to listen when they do. As she spoke, she noticed a new family in the audience. A single father with a shy daughter who reminded her of Madison. The girl clutched her father's hand tightly, but her eyes showed curiosity rather than fear. Progress, Michelle thought. Healing. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and life at the Sunshine Learning Center found its rhythm again. New children arrived, bringing their own stories and challenges. Michelle approached each one with the hard-earned wisdom of someone who understood that truth often hides in the spaces between words, in drawings that speak of pain, in silences that scream for help. Janet retired that summer, passing the directorship to Michelle. In her farewell speech, she said, "Sometimes the hardest truths to see are the ones we think we already understand." Michelle taught us all to look deeper, to question our assumptions, and to never stop advocating for those who can't advocate for themselves. The center flourished under Michelle's leadership, becoming a model for child-focused care that balanced vigilance with warmth, protection with trust. They launched community outreach programs, parent education workshops, and partnerships with local mental health services. 2 years after the Matthews case, Michelle received an unexpected email. Ms. Robinson, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out because Madison and I have been invited to speak at a national conference on child protection and recovery. She's become an advocate for children who've experienced family violence, using her art to help others express their own truths. Madison asked specifically if you would be willing to introduce us at the conference. She says you're the reason she found her voice, and she wants to thank you publicly for never giving up on finding the truth. Please consider this invitation. Your actions changed not only our lives but potentially the lives of countless children whose stories might otherwise go unheard. Warmly, Nathan Matthews, MD, standing on that conference stage 6 months later, watching Madison, now a confident 12-year-old, share her story with hundreds of child protection professionals. Michelle felt the full circle of her journey complete. The scared little girl who once drew dark houses with shuttered windows now created vibrant murals of hope and healing. Ms. Robinson taught me that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth, Madison said. her voice strong and clear. Even when we're scared, even when we've been taught to lie, because someone out there is listening, watching, ready to help. As applause filled the auditorium, Michelle caught Madison's eye. The girl smiled, not the practice smile she'd worn at the center, but a genuine expression of joy and gratitude. In that moment, Michelle knew that every difficult decision, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had been worth it. The Matthews case had changed her forever, teaching her that truth often wears disguises, that monsters can have beautiful faces, and that sometimes the most important clues are the ones we almost miss. But it had also reaffirmed her faith in the power of observation, the importance of persistence, and the profound impact one person can have when they refuse to look away from a child's silent cry for help. As she walked back to her seat, Michelle passed a group of young teachers, their faces eager and idealistic, much as hers had been years ago. She paused, sharing a piece of wisdom that would guide them as it had guided her. Never stop looking beneath the surface. The truth might not be what you expect, but it's always worth finding. And sometimes the child you save might just change the world. Outside, spring rain fell softly on Maple Glen, washing away the last traces of winter and promising new beginnings. In classrooms and courtrooms, in therapy sessions and family homes, the ripples of one woman's vigilance continued to spread, touching lives and changing futures in ways she would never fully know. The hidden truth had been revealed, not just about the Matthews family, but about the complexity of human nature, the resilience of children, and the extraordinary things that can happen when someone cares enough to look beyond the obvious. As Michelle returned to the center the next day, ready to greet a new group of children with watchful eyes and an open heart, she knew that this was her true calling, to be the guardian of small voices, the keeper of children's secrets, and the finder of truths hidden behind closed doors. And somewhere in a different city, in a bright and cheerful home filled with love and laughter, a little girl named Madison picked up her paintbrush and began to create, her artwork a testament to the power of truth and the healing that comes when someone finally sees what others have missed.